right, so this was a fun one to watch as an editing showcase. I mean, it's obviously one where it's part of the joke that sometimes the edits draw attention to itself. So it's probably fun to work in a project like this where the instruction isn't be invisible, which you sometimes get. So I guess you both worked with Jason in some capacity, but not as his main editor before. Is that correct?
I've worked as on with him Telly and a front runner, but as on Afterlife, I was a main editor.
Okay, got
Um,
it.
and
And
then yeah,
and then Shane, you worked on the new Ghostbusters, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So, at what point did, since this is a project from the ground up that really needed to obviously think about how the edit was going to work, it's this ticking clock movie. At what point did you both kind of get involved with Jason and Gil on developing this structure and kind of mapping out how this ticking time bomb movie was going to work?
I mean, both Shane and I were we knew we'd be working on this movie from a very early on, but and honestly, the most was getting our heads in the game was really about music, is him sharing
Mhm.
music with us and where tonally the movie's going to go. But in terms of figuring out that ticking clock, it's kind of something you have to find once you're getting the footage and you're like, all right, how do we express what's on the page editorially? Music would seem to be the only way in to do that beforehand.
We'll unpack the music here. Are we talking the John Batiste score, or do you mean he was sending you songs to think about, basically?
The John Baptiste store, like absolutely, but the songs that he would send were in the genre and vein that John and him ended up going. Obviously, John took it in a whole new direction and a whole new level, but it was just sort of like, drums and this drum tracks that were not what I expected from a movie like this. And somehow I don't think anyone's called in the question that it doesn't make sense because somehow it just does. I can't
Yeah.
explain intellectually why it makes sense. It just
Yeah,
works.
yeah. It was like a
But that
little
was,
wild, like
yeah.
you'd either get a bunch of like needle drops from that time, or but you it was like, oh, there's a wild energy to this music, and that, while John took it another direction, it's like that was clearly in the inception.
Okay, so I have to ask this. Was there ever a thought about trying to weave in some Howard Shore somehow? Since I know he and Lorne came up together, and I was kind of wondering because he did all the original music, right? For SNL.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some saxophone in the early recording sessions with John that we put in, I think, during the oneer. And that's to me the closest we sort of got to bringing in the sound that Howard Shore found for SNL. But other than that, it's sort of, I think Jason wanted to really show some that this is an unfinished idea, that they aren't there yet, that this
Yeah.
isn't the movie, this isn't the Saturday Night Live movie, and here's the Saturday Night Live
Mhm.
score. This is the birth of it. So that's why it's you wait until the end to get the theme.
All right, so this is a movie that is essentially real time. I wasn't timing it on my watch, obviously, but does it actually function as real time? I mean, like, was that something where you guys had to cut the footage down so that it actually, if a minute elapses according to your interludes, only a minute has elapsed on screen? Like, how committed to that exactitude was Jason and both of you?
I think we did our best. There's some creative interpretation, but truthfully, if you really look at the way scenes are working and the way that we intercut scenes, a lot of the idea is that some of these things are happening simultaneously. So even though they may absorb 4 minutes, really 2 minutes are what's sort of taking place in real life. So something might be happening on a different floor or in a different room that we're cutting into. So um, I bet if you really knock it down and you take the things that are overlapping, you're probably pretty much sticking to a real 90, because the film is like an hour and 48, I think, with credits. And so if you look at the Wolverine sketch playing out the way it does, you're sort of talking about the 90 minutes up to that point,
Yeah.
which is also that's sort of on the tail end of it. So I think we were doing our best to be as mindful of that and also just keep that pressure on. And we made choices to keep things tight, but also we weren't going to lose something that felt valuable just to service being exact.
Yeah, well, and so that was, another thing I was curious about. Did Jason film additional recreations or anything like that? Were there darlings you guys had to kill to make this actually feel like it was truly real? No.
No, I read honestly, it's like the film even if it didn't have 90-minute time clock in it, I think this would be still be the cut of the movie. We definitely followed like what was best for the story and best for the film, but I think it's more of a testament to how close it is to the 90 minutes that the script was in the shape that it was when
Mhm.
we filmed it. That they weren't they it wasn't like a shotgun blast, or well, casting a wide net. That's not how this movie was shot. Of like, and then let's find in post what works best. It was very much precise, choreographed, and it was more a matter of trimming lines and just performances.
All right, so what sequence are you guys most proud of?
I'm really proud of the 17th floor. So when you go up into the 17th floor into the writer's room, there was an energy that Jason wanted to find and capture of this. I looked at it as like sort of boiling down what New York City might have felt like for the youth in that room, and what can we pull out of there, and just hearing the sort of chaos of it all, which was really anti what was going on in television at the time. And so, we worked on intercutting that scene quite a bit, and breaking up those conversations with Chevy and Gilda, and the women finding their pages and getting pulled off the couch, and Crowley and O'Donoghue and all that stuff, and sort of started to interweave it, and find fragments of conversations we were coming in and out of. And musically, it was difficult to try and land what we wanted to do that felt different emotionally from where we had come from. And so in assembling it, we sort of found more of this footage of Paul Rust as Schaefer playing the piano. And we luckily had these close-up shots, and we were able to take some score from John that was just him sort of tinkering around on the piano that Jason actually recorded, where he'd have natural outs. He'd just kind of sit there and fiddle with something and let it go. And we were able to put that in, and then with the close shots allow the audience to understand where the music source is coming from, but then play it like this sort of open saloon of youthful energy, youthful creative energy. And that's a place that I've always just, as a fan of Saturday Night Live, it's a place that I've always been interested in seeing, and then to be able to try and find a life for it in this film was something that I'm proud of.
Yeah, I love that improvisational spirit, it sounds like, made its way into the screen here. That's very, very appropriate. Nathan, what about you? Do you have a particular additional sequence you're especially proud of?
Yeah, the I think the nothing from nothing montage at the end, it was such a we wanted, you've been through 90 minutes of anxiety, and now here's your dessert.
Yeah.
Here's hopefully you're smiling from ear to ear from the beginning to the end, watching everyone come together. And it was a very intricate sequence to pull off because it's not just a montage with a needle drop. It's you're showing Billy Preston, live doing this, and in just dipping down for the dialogue scenes, choosing which lyrics we wanted to be on camera, choosing the audience to slowly be warming up as they're filling in and it's clapping. Meanwhile, cross-cutting to George Carlin having lockjaw, doing whip pans and we using whip pans to transition through locations was so much fun and a big challenge. And I'm really proud. I can watch that sequence over and over, and I think it really does accomplish the joy of what you've hopefully feel and wanted to feel after everyone struggled for so long.
I was going to ask you guys about
But
the whip pans. Well, no, okay, you were going to tell me
yeah,
something first.
well, I was
So,
just going to say what I love about that scene too is it's probably one of our favorite laughs in the movie when O'Donoghue hands Henson the script, and he's like, "Oh no," because you sort of think when we're setting that up that everything's going right, and there's almost a part of you as an audience like, "Oh come on, everything's going to go right," and then there are still things that are going wrong, and it's that wonderful balance of like this shit is still continuing. Like people are
Yeah,
still
exactly.
messing with each other, even though we're going to, and the spirit of it feels anarchic. And was that the right word? There's an element of anarchy to the whole
Yeah,
thing, and synergy, and that's really fun.
yeah.
and 50 years later, that's still the case, you know?
I
Yes,
know,
exactly.
right?
Okay, but tell me about those whip pans. They're not just on display in that final sequence, and I figure that is something particularly fun to work with throughout.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Whip pans are really fun because there's such a beautiful like precision and execution to them from Eric Spielberg, our DP, um, and there's no edge of frame in there, so the camera was really able to sort of freely move around and fly through and transport the audience in this really fun way and punch up comedy. But on the 17th floor, as well as in the montage at the end, as we would sort of deconstruct some things, because for instance, like when you walk into that room, they sort of choreographed it where you're following O'Donoghue. He talks to someone. He comes over here. He sits next to Franken and Davis. The camera moves off to Chevy. Chevy and Herb have an interaction. Then it whips off of Chevy to this. And those are all like choreographed things. But as you want the film to sort of start to have even more energy to it, it starts to tell you what it wants to be in the edit. You deconstruct some stuff, and then we were able to find these like really cool whip pans that would sort of move from one whip pan into another whip pan so seamlessly and transport you like from Lorne's face all the way out the door into Crowley talking to Franken and Davis. And so yeah, they're beautiful when they work within the shot, but then also sometimes they just give you these little flourishes that keep the film feeling alive.
There's a couple moments with the Willem Dafoe character that I wanted to talk about. The obvious one is that basically you guys have this sequence that's almost like a mini trailer in the middle of the movie where it's Willem Dafoe confronts Lorne in the hall, and he does the whole thing of like, your writers are stoned, you're not ready, and it has a cutaway to one of, each of the things he's describing, kind of recapping. Tell me about that moment a little bit.
That was something that I pitched to Jason and Nathan. I worked on it late at night because I sort of recognized that I liked it. A lot of it started just rhythmically. It was like, here he is listing off these things, and within it, I listen. I came up in the commercial world. There's a lot of quick stylized editing in there, and there's stuff that I love, and there's stuff that I really don't like, because sometimes it's not storytelling and sometimes it's flash to be flash. But I think, learning from editors like Hank Corwin and Kirk Baxter, there are these ways to elicit a sort of an emotional response, and be provocative while also continuing to tell the story. And so it was like, here's a cool way to do something rhythmic. But then in constructing it, it was like, it also shows you, perhaps this is the point of view of Tebbit, and that he's telling you that he sees everything that's going on around him. His eyes are on you all the time, which is why we use different angles of certain shots to convey that. And then also it's like Lorne being caught red-handed, like he thinks he's getting away with it, and he sort of looks like a child in the moment that's gotten busted. And all you want to do is, with the intention of that scene, is try and crack Lorne's mind open a little bit, and as an audience, peer inside a little more. And the ways that we found to do that within the film were really like thrilling, and I think added another layer.
Well, and also the thing I like with Defoe is, and maybe I'm misremembering, but the way you introduce him, I think we start with his hand with rings in his fingers grabbing like a glass of scotch or something. And I thought that was a really interesting choice. I was curious how that came about.
That was actually originally supposed to be at the beginning of that scene, and we decided to sort of save that reveal to the middle of the scene so that we could let Lorne just sort of flounder and see if people let Chevy start. And then I think it's a moment of the scene where it's like this, it's been chaos, and you tell the two jokes, and it was sort of like, we're talking about like, that's the point where we're seeing, you're like, all right, now that's when you introduce the threat. That's when you need like this, like, okay, now that we're here and settle in what's actually happening, and cutting to Tebbit there to plant the seed of, oh, here's this guy, everyone's facing that way, he's facing this way, he's different. And it really makes him scary, I think, in that regard, or at least intriguing. And so that was an important moment to sort of like nail his character introduction.
He's also taking his time, which I find very interesting with that. He flicks the liquid off. He wraps his hand around it in a sort of snake-like way. And this is where sound comes in as a character, because at one point we had like a little sip, and we were talking about like Tebbit doesn't sip, like
Yeah.
Tebbit
Yeah.
savors, and so like you're even in sound, you're trying to explore like what that character's traits are.
And he's the only character not in a hurry.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's so true.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay, so speaking of sound, there's another great moment, which is my mind's going blank, but he smokes far too much and he gets incredibly high and he's stumbling around,
Oh yeah.
basically having just a bad trip. And that's a great sequence. I'd love to hear a little bit about putting that together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go, Nathan, go.
Oh, this is Neil getting stoned though. This is Shane came up with this really great pitch of like initially we had this great track there and I do love the music there, but of him to sort of like start to lose it and Garrett's voice getting lower and then when the lights go down, it's just that perspective of like everything crashing down when you're stoned. And my favorite idea in there is the I'm John, and then echoing it in perpetuity. Like it was so smart and really just really enhanced the surrealism of that
Yeah,
moment.
thank you,
And
John. Thank you, Will Files, right?
yeah, Will did
Yeah.
such a great job in that
Yeah,
sequence, and it is such a it's a rich sequence too, because you can also hear, Franken and Davis going Belushi, Belushi, like it's all kind of coming back and swirling together, which is really fun. And that's part of the part of post-production to explore stylistically if the film can support those kinds of moments.
hmm
Because
hmm
that was not part of the original script, getting that surreal.
Hmm.
And it was a question like, can we earn this? And I think the more fun you have with it, as long as you make it entertaining, you can earn it as all you
Oh
want.
yeah.
Like, and
Yeah,
yeah,
no, that's a great moment. It's a standout, and I think it's very fitting for the world you guys created of a bunch of druggies basically who
yeah,
Well, it also escalates to another break at the clock, which and that one always gets a big laugh because the simmering pot, finally starts to boil, and Neil's just like the most innocent character in the movie, who all of a sudden you're like, everything is crashing around him, and it was perfect because Garrett says a lot of it. He has a lot of the same thread in him trying to feel like he belongs. So it almost feels trippy. Like, why is this guy
yeah.
asking him? Why is he in a B suit right there? And instead of just being like, oh, Garrett as a character is in a B suit right there, it's like, is he? Or does Neil think he saw him in a B
Yeah.
suit? And like, I think it just adds this other layer that is fun and unpredictable. And that was the joy of cutting this movie, is how do we keep the audience guessing, and how do we keep something new around each corner.
And last two questions. One of them you just touched on. Um, Someone mentioned that some of the best on a review I was listening to recently that some of the best punchlines are just literally the existence of a clock saying like 47 minutes. And those just interjections of this reminder that oh shit we're so close are hysterical. So I'm sure a lot of the breaks were scripted, but I would love to hear a little bit about um, how you both chose the moments to stick those reminders to the audience in there.
actually, none of them were scripted, and
Really?
it's actually it's part of one of the elements of finding this film in post that I think I'm proud of, that Shane and I like we found in the assembly cut that the chaos built on chaos built on chaos. And if you didn't take even a breath, and I think those clocks are only, I mean, they're all the same. I think they're only 2 seconds and like 12 frames. If you didn't take any breath like that, it kind of you came numb to it. And we also started thinking, do we want to shoot some inserts of clocks and get inside and show gears and doing a second hand? Do we want to hear people talk? I think from set we got Joe Dixo, the AD, to like record extra like 30 minutes and or 65 minutes, like so we have it sound wise. And it became this idea we came up with, especially with John Baptiste's like score, like when he recorded that on set, like he did the simple wood block. And I remember we all just looking at each other and being like, that's the clock. That's the villain's theme. That's our
Mhm.
that's our Jaws. Is time. It's time. And then when we got back to LA, working with the idea of it, like it became so simple that what if we just sucked all of the air out? Would always climax on a something, chaotic and noisy, and then juxtaposition is, the biggest key to like ground yourself. And so going to silence with just a simple wood block and showing that only 1 minute has passed, it felt like that's when we really unlocked a huge key to the film and a huge key to give people an anchor of where you are, as well as provide like you said, like it's very funny. My favorite one actually might be after the light boom fall and children's television workshop that says 10:12 to 12:13. You're like, oh my God, only 12 minutes have passed. Are you
But
funny?
it's just off of Lord's. It's off of Lord's face, who just looks
Yeah.
so humiliated and frustrated, and he's just like dumbfounded, and then it's like click, and
Yeah.
and even like when he bursts through the door, when he smashes the window, that shot finished with him stepping in and putting the thing down, and the camera finding like the peacock onto this like teetering, but then Nathan and I think one night we're like, let's just put it on the glass break, and it's funny.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like
It's like
that,
you're back in. Here we go.
yeah, and so it inspired the idea, just inspired breaks that to you, which is great, feel like they're intentional, and that's the point, is that they don't feel distracting, but they feel like almost written. And that's the balance you're trying to find, is how do you support the film and elevate it with these concepts instead of distracting from it.
I'm
You just need
stunned
moments
that
to
they weren't
digest.
scripted. Yeah, no,
like after, yeah.
the film would not have worked without those. So I'm very impressed. Last question. Were there any moments that ended up being reordered in the film? Lorne leaving the building, anything like that were scripted to take place earlier, but the film just kind of called in the edit to have them at a different time?
The big one that I can think of is after when the light boom falls and all the chaos is happening, you follow Garrett to shooting at the Muppets, and then Henson comes out and they have their exchange, and then you were supposed to leave that conversation with Garrett over to Billy Preston and the band, and then they had their interaction, and then you came back to the lighting director, fleeing the set, and it was like, just by moving that over, and this became a lot easier when we had the clock break to sort of reestablish our time. It was like you wanted that to just go to the end. You wanted that argument and that chaos. Like you couldn't really believe that the fight would still be going on for 3 minutes in the background. So I think just a couple things like that weren't huge, but it was like once you just moved that and locked this in and went, oh, great, this all kind of flows. Let's now reduce this to make this feel tense. And then we can save the scene over here, and we're not feeling like, why are we not back over there listening to this? Or having yelling in the background that would take away from that scene, which is a big part too.
Yeah. I mean, the little things like in the Nothing from Nothing montage, originally the moment where Franken and Davis are like kind of screwing with O'Donoghue, getting ready, that took place technically during the montage.
Mm.
And it was sort of like, this doesn't fit here. And we found that it was better actually before, as everyone was getting ready. It was just stuff like that. It wasn't nothing huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's really wonderful work, and
Thank you.
I guess it's been a big year for editing for you guys anyway, because you worked on Deadpool 2 or Deadpool 3, I think, and yeah. Anything else exciting on the radar for both of you?
Hopefully, I don't know things that we can discuss right now, but
I always try to.
Hopefully for both of us.
I always try to find that out, and sometimes they let it slip, and sometimes they don't. So, all right. Well, thank you guys both.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, at the bare minimum, I see a American Cinema Editors Comedy nomination for you guys on the radar, and who knows? Maybe there's an Oscar nomination in there too. So. We shall see.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Very nice to you.
All right. Well, good luck, guys.
Thank you.